Good evening and welcome to the Grafton Select Board meeting for February 15th of 2022. I would like to call the meeting to order. First order of business, would please everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. Thank you. Anyone who would like to make a public comment? Anyone in the Zoom? Anyone in the Zoom like to come in and make a public comment? Use the raise hand function. All right, not seeing any. Let's move forward. First up on the schedule here, we have Snow Road Development, and we have with us a few attendees. We have developers, James, I'm going to say it, Benincasa. Did I get it right?
It's pretty good.
Oh,
pretty
thank
good.
you.
Good
All
job.
I would like to welcome you all to the meeting,
This
and
is
I'm going
John
to give the
Greg
floor
here,
over
and
to
then
you.
James Benincasa is my uncle Steve, Steven Benincasa. He's the handsome guy walking around, changing his stuff.
I think he's muted now.
You muted, Steve?
No, it should be on here.
Okay, no, you're good.
I can hear you.
All right,
Can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Hey, can you
Okay, good.
You want us to present?
the left?
Yes,
John,
you guys have the floor if you'd like to present.
The
Yes, your
panelist,
plan.
Okay, all
on the
right.
right-hand
Thank you very
side,
much.
to the left of the screen, so we
So
don't hide in that
We're
guy.
here tonight to talk to you about a piece of property at 14 Snow Road. And just to give everyone an idea where it is, where we abut the Stop and Shop Plaza that's on 140, that abuts us to the south. And on diagonal, a little bit on the other side of the street to the west, the Grafton Housing Authority, they have multifamily apartment style units come across the street. So this is, it's a little under 15 acres at 14 Snow Road. We are looking to redevelop this property. Currently it has a small single family house located on it. And we are looking to propose a multifamily apartment style residential community for this. We did, I believe, submit a conceptual plan just so you have an idea of approximately what we're looking to do. But that is a mix of apartment style homes. Mixed in with that are townhouse style homes. So we're looking at about 4 64 unit residential buildings. That would be a total of 256 apartment style units. And then the townhouses, we have a total of 44 townhouse style units. And those would be a mix of duplexes and fourplexes. And on the plan, we're showing those pretty much on the north side perimeter and then on the westerly side along Snow Road. So that would be a total of 300 total units. So we're looking also with that, we'd have a clubhouse. At the center portion of the parcel, we had more of a common area, a green area, like a quad style at the center portion, where we have other amenities associated with the residential development. And we would have adequate parking for both the apartment style and the townhouses. On our parking layout that we have in the conceptual, we had a total of 439 parking spaces associated with the apartment style housing. And that's a ratio of about 1.7 parking spaces per unit. And for the townhouses, we had 2 per unit. So of the 44 units, we have a total of 88 parking spaces. So that's a total of 527 parking spaces for the entire project. So we're really coming in to introduce ourselves, get some feedback from your board. And the group that we have has other projects in the area. One that was built out in the past year or two was Cobblestone Village, which is on Howe Ave in Millbury. And in Boylston, there's another, Brookside Apartments, which that was just built in the past year or two. And the type of developments that our group does are high-end, modern style developments that we believe are a real good benefit, and they meet the housing needs in these towns. In Millbury especially, it was very successful, very popular.
Actually, permitting our second one.
And actually, we were permitting, right around the corner from the one on Howe Ave, over on Railroad, right next to Railroad Court. There's another 59 unit building that's currently under construction right now. So, we're just looking to actually introduce ourselves, and then, what's that?
You say it was
Oh. Yeah, and we are hoping to do this. Well, it would be a 40B. I'm assuming you know that. And we would like to work with the town. We'd like to have this as a LIP, to try to work with the community, do something that is a benefit for everybody and meets housing needs within the town. So with that, I'd put it to the chair with any questions, comments, feedback that we'd like to get from you.
Thank you for that. My first question I have, and this is more of a procedural, have you scheduled a meeting with Grafton's Affordable Housing Trust at this point?
No, we have not.
Okay. At the conclusion of this meeting, I'll make sure you get the chair's contact information. I would encourage you to reach out, as the chair of that committee has reached out to me and is very interested in hearing, this proposal and potentially maybe asking questions of your development going further. Just from a procedural matter, that's the only request I have. Does anyone from the board have any questions, or Chris, did you want to present anything at this point?
No, I think the applicants presented the project pretty well, so I'm happy to answer any questions as we move forward through the process. But
Thank you. All right, any of the board members have any questions?
Does everybody know what the LIP process is?
Yeah, so can you just briefly walk us through that?
yeah, so the LIP process, it's that's what's commonly called a friendly 40B. So kind of the short end of it is that it seeks local approval prior to the application to DHCD for project eligibility. It kind of expedites things on DHCD. It signals to them that this is a project that the community supports, has reviewed in a conceptual phase, and that is looking to partner with the developer and moving through the development process. It still goes through the regular local permitting process, which would be the Zoning Board of Appeals. But those previous steps with DHCD prior to applying to ZBA, this gives that, the select board would take a look at this, have any questions or concerns answered, and the final deliverable that they would be seeking from the select board is a letter of support that they would include with their application to DHCD, which just expedites their process there.
So would we want to get materials to ZBA, planning, conservation in advance of like evaluating the LIP? I'm just wondering at what point we bring in the various stakeholders.
Yeah, so the ZBA would still be reviewing the application after DHCD issues that project eligibility letter.
Yeah.
You can certainly, as part of the select board's initial review, solicit comments from the Zoning Board of Appeals that could certainly be beneficial to give them a first kind of peek at the project, and then obviously any kind of staff, if you wanted staff to take a quick look at it. The applicant, I have met with the applicant and we went over the project from a procedural standpoint, so I'm happy to issue a letter to that effect too, if that's helpful.
Other questions from the board?
I don't have it off the top of my head. You said the number of types of units you're gonna have. Do you have number of bedrooms for those?
We have
gonna-
it. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, 55% one bedrooms, 35% two bedrooms, 10% three bedrooms. The 10% three bedrooms, we need that for eligibility for the state. 55% one bedrooms, 35% two bedrooms, 10% three bedrooms.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up to that, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Joey.
Just a question on the parking. Is the 1.7 parking spaces per the fourplexes common? Is that what's usually done? I mean, if we're looking at 2 to 3 bedrooms with that kind of parking spaces, is that doable?
Yeah, so the 55% is a one bedroom. We get a number of single people through various circumstances. You can imagine, I want to get into that. But in any event, we get, because it's 55% one bedroom units, we found it in our other developments, when we do that ratio 1.7, we have vacant spots. So the one thing we do not want is to have not enough parking for our tenants, which are our customers. So we don't want to shortchange us that number, but we also don't want a sea of asphalt because it's unattractive and it's not environmentally, the thing to do. So we want to do a nicely landscaped project. We want it to look attractive. And honestly, the pavement is, for the parking is just, it's a necessary evil. We have to have the pavement. So we only do what we think we need.
Great, thank you.
Does any of the select board members have any questions? Ray, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just one. I'm assuming there'll be an underground water retention system here.
For drainage?
Yeah,
you're saying?
a Caltech system or something to that sort.
Yeah, we would. There are good soils on site. So to the extent that we can recharge water from the roof runoff, we would, for the volume of water, we would need a detention basin or an infiltration basin. But where we can, have downspouts from roof, recharge roof runoff, that's what we anticipate to do. Because the other thing we don't want is a big, ugly basin, in the project. So to the extent that we can reduce the size of that and recharge the groundwater, especially where we have good soils, we take advantage of that.
Okay, there's just not a lot of room left on this piece of property to put in a retention pond, and that's why I asked if a Caltech system was going to be put underneath the pavement.
Right. No, we were leaving some area. The lowest elevation on the site is at the northeast portion of it. So we were thinking along the northeast section of the site, we were leaving an area open to do some detention basins as well.
Okay,
So,
I mean it's preliminary, so it's
again, it's preliminary. We're going to be, things are going to be changing once we nail down exact units, and we have approximate boxes that, the size that we need. But once we start nailing down footprints and all of that, getting into the hard engineering, we'll be nailing that down.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board members?
Do you want me to back up and talk about the LIP just a little more? Yeah? Is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
So the LIP is the local initiative program, started in the 90s, and it's essentially a affordable housing subsidy program. Unlike state and federal programs that you would normally see, the municipality winds up being in the driver's seat for a lot of it. And so what happens is the developer's first step is to come and present the information to you at the select board, answer any questions you have, and members of the public. At this time, you could kick this out to your various boards, committees, staff members that you would like some feedback from prior to voting to support. You probably don't want to go into the depth of a full project review, because that's going to go through the municipal project anyways, but could solicit feedback from the Affordable Housing Trust or your staff, your planner, or whoever you'd like. You then vote to support or not support, but let's say you've voted to support the project. We then write a letter of support signed by the chair. The chair also signs the LIP application that goes to DHCD for review. Once DHCD reviews, and they have, I think, 30 days to review, then DHCD reviews and orders an appraisal of the land. They then issue a project eligibility letter for 40B and LIP. They then set up site meetings with DHCD and members of the municipality. And then the developer takes the plan to ZBA for the comprehensive permitting process. So that's really when it's going to get to the full ZBA review. Isn't really till step 9 or 10, depending on how you're counting these steps. And then assuming that the permit is issued by the ZBA, it's then recorded in an agreement. And then they do the affirmative housing and tenant selection plan. Is reviewed. So it's a multi-step project. Step one is to come before you folks, get essentially your blessing on not necessarily the finite details of it, but the 300 unit project going onto that site. Is that what Grafton needs? Is that, there's all those are the questions that you're asking, not necessarily, like I said, the finite minutia. That can be something that you might ask your staff to provide a little review on and see whether or not it's a prospective good idea for the area.
Any questions on the board?
Yeah, just quickly. So I'm just thinking about the typical site plan review process and what type of information flows through ZBA planning, conservation and whatnot. Seems like we need to go through almost a mini version of that. I guess it feels weird without having some expert review, and commentary in the various areas, like things like, water management and, pavement and zoning and, all of the things that get reviewed, lighting. I know that, so we're not going to have those details until we go through ZBA. So I guess that's where I'm getting hung up a little bit.
Right, and that's their role.
Yeah.
Right, is to make sure we're checking all the boxes for what the town of Grafton needs in a project. Right, whether that's parking, lighting, stormwater management, whatever those are. You're more of a 35,000 foot overview saying, this is a good idea. We need housing. The location is, acceptable to us, and we'd like to see the project move forward. Bruce?
Oh, I'm sorry, let him finish. Okay, Bruce, thank you.
Just
Nope.
I got
I'm
you
here.
next.
I don't know. Bruce knows what I'm talking about.
I do.
You're exactly correct, and we will have to go through all that review process of having an engineer review our engineering documents, and we'll provide traffic study, wetland report. We'll do all the drainage calculations, and all that will be reviewed from an engineer that generally you hire and we pay you for. Similar to the planning board process, a little bit different, but a lot the same.
Bruce, did you have a question?
Just a comment, actually. Just for reference point, I'm the chair that the other chair alluded to for the housing trust. Well, there's a few housing trust members here today. We have a joint meeting with the select board after this, and it was nice that the select board put this first, so the trust would have a 1,000-foot view of this before you came to us, hopefully. But just from a matter of perspective, historically speaking, the most recent LIP you had would be Prentice Place.
Okay.
So in that process, the LIP is kind of like this weird trap where, you come in and everybody's like, oh, sounds great. We want to do a whole bunch of units. And then it gets punted and the ZBA picks it up and it can spend years there, which Prentice Place did spend years there.
And you've had some lips that haven't gone through the trust. That particular one did. So it's kind of a setup for, I think, some of the discussion we're going to have further down is, assessing housing needs beyond, when we get to that 10% SHI, which we're very close to. And I know Chris could probably give you an update on that as well with the amount of development we have currently in the town. Lets you be a little bit more specific on and tailoring these projects to what you want to see before you sign off on the LIP. The other thing you can do is, to make sure that after it leaves the select board, historically it's just been gone. The only reason why the select board got back into it the last time is it ended up being litigated back and forth, and we had to send representation to try to iron out what they really wanted to look like. And as you know, it just started being built about 3 or 4 months ago. It's very easy to get into the granular stuff, get into the weeds on the LIP process, but it goes through a very comprehensive permitting process. It just goes to the ZBA. So like GSX project up on Upton, that's an overlay that got popped in there, which is another avenue to go with projects like this if you're going to take a look at overall zoning in places. So you're looking at density, like the new MBTA rules and things of that nature. You can look at different parts of town where these developers are going to go, so they don't necessarily have to go through a ZBA process.
Yep.
They can do what we're doing up there. So I just want to make sure everybody's, open to thinking outside of the box as we're trying to, meet housing needs, not necessarily for the 10% threshold in the town to get ahead of 40B, but also, in the entire Commonwealth, which is there's, pretty dramatic shortages out there. And all that's helpful even if it goes beyond the 10%. So I just, if you take a look at some of those projects, which I think were, handled poorly, it's a good opportunity to kind of get in front of them in this particular one. And Mr. Chair, I know that Chris has been working with DHCD now. I know you sent something to them to get a handle on whether or not we were going to be in safe harbor, when we were going to be in safe harbor, at what point we can start taking credit for the Pine Street project and things like that. I don't know if it's relevant to this conversation or you want to wait till afterwards, but
It has really nothing to pertain to them yet, as you alluded to earlier.
well, for
right?
these folks, it does kind of pertain to, because if we are in safe harbor, it would have an impact on perhaps what their overall goals were for the project. Because if we're not in safe harbor and they can't work something out with ZBA, there are other avenues for them to take
All right.
where they can be allowed to do what they want to do, and we don't get much of a say. If we are in safe harbor, if we are at our threshold, then that changes things. The ask we can make of them for demographic assignments, parking assignments, infrastructure, work that we probably wouldn't be able to ask for in another situation, you can open up those things in this particular situation, and it would behoove the town to do that in the LIP process.
Colleen?
So I know we don't have one ready and we're just looking into it right now, but the HCA that we're contemplating down the road, would that come up at this point in the process for the next, next snow road type project that comes before us, or would that come down later in the whole LIP process?
I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
I have to give that some broader thought.
So at this point, one of the things I wanted to do is make sure we had this presentation first. I did speak to the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust last week about this process. And I just want to know what is the, board's wish tonight, if it wants to hold off on endorsing, taking a vote of letter of support for the project and wait to get some more information, or does it feel comfortable tonight in wanting to move forward in supporting this process or this project? The step one, as Chris alluded to, is it starts here with the select board members answering questions and comments, and then the step two would be then vote on the project once all the questions are answered. It seems like we have some outstanding ones, but I just want to make sure the board's got an opportunity here to weigh in on what it wants to do. Colleen?
Well, I guess Bruce just made a good point. If we are in safe harbor or if we aren't in safe harbor, and that seems like something that we might want to have a handle on before we let the horse out of the barn on this, but I don't know if I'm seeing that wrong or not.
I had the same question.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I would like to take a step back now that we've had this presentation and some discussion around the LIP process to think about what we would ask staff and other boards and committees to advise us on before I would feel comfortable making a decision one way or another.
Ray?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, looking at this site plan, I have a concern that retention ponds and underground drainage systems might reduce the amount of units here, but I think we should hold off.
Okay, all right. So at this point, I'll just leave it. Does the developers have any last questions or statements it wants to make? And then what we'll do is we'll table this action item tonight for a future date.
So at this point, you'd like us to go before the Affordable Housing Commission? Are we going to get an appointment with that board next? Would that be the appropriate action you want us to take?
That was what the chair had desired that I ask you to do, yes.
That's fine. We're happy to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. All right, if there isn't any other questions or discussion? Well, I want to thank you guys for coming in tonight and presenting. I look forward to speaking further and having you in a future meeting. And stay tuned.
All right, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yep. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to take this moment and welcome everyone here from the Affordable Housing Trust. I want to just make some introductions here for the public. We have the chair, Bruce Spinney. We have Eric Swenson. We have Brittany Morgan. We have Dan Kushner. We have Ed Prisby. And I believe LaQuisha had joined us, but I don't see her. I think she might have dropped off. But why don't we go ahead and get started? So welcome. Thank you very much for coming out tonight to our meeting. I want to just hand this off because I know Doreen had one simple ask and what it was a goal that the select board had. I thought I warned you about that.
So you want me to start?
Just start with what was our overarching goal that we did back in the fall?
Sure. And I think the Affordable Housing Trust is aware of this, but so a couple years ago, the select board started doing goals meetings for the first time ever. And we started to establish long-term goals for the board of how we were going to have more of a strategic plan or a visionary plan moving forward and be able to track that. So every year it's gotten a little bit better, and this year we're trying to follow through on our goals more directly. And one of the things that came up in our goals meeting in November this year was to support affordable housing. And so, it's nice in theory for an executive board to say, oh, we support affordable housing collectively. But then Bruce was going to come in front of the board, I think in January, and we started having the conversation and reminded ourselves, hey, we support affordable housing. What does that mean? Would it be a good idea, instead of just Bruce coming in, since we have some new members on the board and some established members, on the trust, and some established members on the trust, to try here to open up some dialogue and see how we as a select board can do, and I'll use the term, better job in supporting the Affordable Housing Trust. And I will also just add, I watched the meeting last Thursday when you guys all met, and I hear and recognize the concerns, and we can, certainly talk about some of those in details. Colleen put together some great slides of some action items for us to discuss. And from my standpoint, and I think our board standpoint, what we're trying to figure out is how do we support affordable housing? How do you see our role, if any, in supporting affordable housing? And we can talk about what that means or specific projects, but this is really just, in my opinion, an opportunity for us to for our board to establish some real effective goals and be able to bring those into action. And we can't do that without really knowing specifics from the Affordable Housing Trust. So we thought, what better way than to invite you all in and just have the conversation. So
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. I know that we had some materials presented ahead of this meeting. Do you think it would be prudent just to screen share right now and just maybe use that as a guide going forward? Or do you want to start with some opening comments?
No, I think you have the couple of slides which were reference points to what we discussed last Thursday.
Yeah.
So we went through at length some of the things we wanted to see and discuss. I just want to preface some of the discussion with my fellow trust members that were at your meeting, and then to direct their comments through Mr. Carlson, and as allow him to kind of facilitate the dialogue. So if you make your way around, we have some people hybrid. Most of us are hybrid, actually.
Yep.
So just be cognizant of those folks
I
there.
got them up on my screen here.
That's perfect. And one other thing is, some technical aspects for updates on particular projects, which is what I would have done in January. I can do that after this is over. So,
great.
That works. Thanks,
Yeah.
Bruce. Okay. All right. Why don't we start with the first slide here? So, next, advance it one more, please. I think we're at this part. So we noticed that the Affordable Housing Trust bylaw came up, and did you want to maybe lead on this one? You put these slides together.
Yeah, so these slides are everything that I heard the trust talking about last week. Well, not everything, but a majority of the things the trust was talking about last week that they wanted to see, possible support from the board. And amending a bylaw is something that we could help support you guys in doing that. We just appointed a bylaw review committee. What I heard at that meeting last week was that you guys would want the autonomy to hire your own staff. Is there anything else in the bylaw, or do you guys want to take the opportunity to kind of go through it, or wait for the committee, or how do you guys see the select board helping you guys achieve this goal?
are you looking for a response from us?
I did, yeah, open discussion, yes.
Okay. For a bylaw change, that we talked about last spring was when we were looking to go out and hire. I'm sure Evan can probably provide you with a little update on the municipal side of that, but what we found is finding candidates that could actually fill the position has been cumbersome. Probably a combination of lack of candidates, the candidate pool, and probably lack of sufficiently funding a position that's going to attract those particular candidates that we're looking for. One of the thoughts we had back then was to change the bylaw to allow us to be able to hire independently. I feel pretty comfortable now that Mr. Prisby brought Mass Housing before us, and we submitted for an award for them to help us with some consulting services that it will alleviate some of our immediate, 1,000-foot up, and then some of the technical assistance that we're going to need after we decide what we want to do. But as far as staff is concerned, we're still going to need a dedicated member, like we had years and years ago with the assistant town planner position. Anybody from the trust who wants to chime in to further that, but I think we kind of we're okay with, going out and finding somebody and still partnering with finance committee or the planning office, before we go the route of changing the bylaw.
Okay.
So I think in the end of the day, we could actually go out and hire consultant services like we've hired our own attorney. We can manage it that way as well. But it'd be nice if we were collaborative and working with a position that I think the town needs anyways, so.
Bruce, would it be a good idea to maybe ask like what technical areas of expertise, just because a lot of people in the public are probably aren't aware of maybe some of the details that go into this type of position that you're looking for from the trust?
Sure. For right now, just anybody who's actually willing to do it. The problem with that is you got to have some type of expertise to understand, where to find information. But most of the stuff we're looking for is just administrative functions. Setting up meetings, making sure paperwork gets signed, making sure bills get submitted, so that it's in an orderly fashion and it's in a professional manner. can't really rely on trust members to do that. Not that they're not capable of doing that, but they're 2-year terms. And, you know, we see a lot of turnover just with board membership anyways. As we approach the point where we're going to be spending millions of dollars in grant funding and actually monitoring these programs, which is going to be part of the trust purview, we need to make sure that we have some continuity as trust members roll off and come back on, that we have resources that can still administer the grant. The one in particular, which of course I'll update you on later, you know, is a significant amount of money. And it's going to be over the course of many years. So, you know, my term's up in June. So, you know, if I go off and somebody else comes on, then, you know, whoever was facilitating that grant, you know, that needs to be in-house. The other thing that, you know, and I know staffing is not on this particular one, but it, you know, the town is going to see, you know, a couple $100 million worth of development over the next few years. And starting now with Pine Street, you know, we would like to have somebody in-house that can, you know, cover us, and then we can participate in that, so the town can, you know, receive some benefit to that position. Because I don't think we're going to be able to spend and get what we need for the money that we're going to be able to pony up. Perhaps going to that next tier, and having the trust, you know, help that municipal and find that position. Because, you know, in the past we had, you know, Ann Morgan, we had Rachel in assistant town planner positions, but, you know, it's typically a jumping point for them to go off and find jobs, and that's what they did. They went to other communities and became their town planners. So I guess that's
Okay.
kind of where that's at. Technical expertise is going to be kind of something that's going to be a collective position. So, do you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly, I think to just riff on what Bruce was talking about a little bit, you know, and then another thing that I heard in our meeting was, yeah, general capacity in, you know, land use and planning in the town is definitely lacking right now. I'm fairly new to the trust, but it has become really obvious to me that you have to be pretty creative, particularly in the suburbs, to make anything happen with affordable housing, and we're not going to be able to do that if we don't have the resources to be able to have a little bit of headspace and have that kind of creativity to try to make something happen with affordable housing. That's true for planning, and it's also true for economic development. So there's a lot of things that converge to benefit the town overall, not just for the trust, but also for lots of other really fundamental town operations that are happening right now. And Bruce alluded to the rapid pace of development happening right now. So I think there's a lot of things that we as a board need to consider as far as how to support what the town needs right now. So it's not just about hours for, you know, trust administrative operations. It really is about our overall capabilities for land use and development.
Just some salient points to, you know, what that means to us. Most of the projects that we have before us now are a matter of taking advantage of a particular opportunity that was presented, typically coming from staff. You know, grants, finding other avenues, you know, we can do that on the trust behalf. But having boots on the ground, you know, we have our own, you know, jobs and everything like that. The trust is more for oversight than anything else. But having people in a position where they're doing this on an active basis. You know, you got GSX up on Upton Street because they bid for Pine.
Right.
They were the only people that went up there. The only reason why they were bidding for Pine is because we went through the process of DCAM years ago to see how do we pull that out, what we can do with it, what type of partnerships are there. You know, and that's typically coming and being driven by staff, because we're not out there seeing that. You know, I know about DCAM, of course. I mean, I've been around for a long, long time, so I know the people to talk to, but it's not typically what you're going to see. And you know, introducing the particular thing is going to require staff to actually get it done, and then to hold the hand. So one of the fall down points for Prentice Place was it left the select board, and he was on his own. So, you know, the trust, you know, from our perspective, and I think we've talked about this a lot, is, you know, when some of these projects come in that are worthwhile, we need to have 7 or 8 or 10 people in that ZBA audience because I guarantee you it's going to be 50 people that don't want to see the project. And I know we're going to go into the next piece, and we're going to talk about this a little more, what it actually means for you guys to come and support us. But that's one of the avenues to take. You know, you have a hostile crowd, that dictates a room. You have 50 people yelling at you. I don't particularly mind it. Some other people don't particularly mind it. Some people feed off it, but it will move a room, and it becomes much more difficult for them to get a project that might be valid through that process. But having 20 people there saying, yeah, we like this. This is why it's good for the town. And then at your meeting, you're also saying, this is why this is good for the town. This is our overall vision for the next 10 years. Take the housing production plan, read the thing, and say what it says to do. Very typical of the master plan. The master plan has us building out. We're at 19-something thousand now. We could be at 30,000 in this community easily in a couple decades. And we want to make sure we're taking advantage of the opportunities now. The grant money, the housing crisis, the money that's out there that we can, kind of bring into these projects, and then also to, manage zoning. It's tough to do when you only have, a town planner and no other resources to feed those type of initiatives. Very, very difficult. And that village mixed use that we kind of overlaid up there, that was a product of a past town planner who's no longer with us, but he moved on. But those type of things actually bore fruit after a decade, and you're seeing it up there. So, and I apologize, just I'm like normal, I'm monopolizing the conversation. So
I'll cut you
anybody
off.
else?
Does anyone else in the trust have any comments
Appreciate
or
that.
questions?
Well, then I'll keep talking.
That's why we called everybody else in and not just you, Bruce. No, I'm just kidding.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I hear that on a regular basis.
All right. So it sounds like to me there's definitely an administrative role that needs to be prioritized on the town's behest to support the trusts. That's what I've heard.
Yeah,
And then I
beyond
heard,
that too.
Mr. Chair, can I add? I also heard that supporting projects publicly, particularly during outreach meetings, for us to kind of collaborate with the trust when, depending on schedules of your outreach meetings and supporting a project, that this board should also be actively involved in expressing its support for these projects, whether it's, as board members at the outreach meetings or during our board meetings, stating that and explaining why, being more involved in the process, explaining why this is good for Grafton.
Well, you guys are one step further than that too. Is you have a couple members that are getting off this board, and then 2 more members coming in. As a matter of policy, something should be in place. You're the appointing authority for a lot of boards and committees that touch housing in town, especially the ZBA. You're the appointing authority for the ZBA. I've been up here. I've had plenty of the appointment slates and stuff like that. Never asked the questions myself, so it's certainly not. Not trying to say anything beyond the fact that perhaps that should be part of how we find candidates for the ZBA. And if you only have one, perhaps it's not a bad idea to say, well, you know what, we're going to wait and see if we can find a candidate. And all those candidates should be telling us what their views are on affordability, housing in town, because I think you're going to find that it goes in a lot of different directions, and the understanding of that board on what the overall strategy is for the town as we deploy and we approach that master plan number and how we want to get there. And that needs to live on past this particular board, because of course you're reappointing every year. Because you're going to kick this LIP project off, and we're going to get all excited about it, and we're going to say, yeah, this is great for the town, and then it's going to spend 2.5 years at the ZBA. So there's got to be some. You don't lean on them, of course. That's not what you're supposed to do, but when you appoint those particular positions, that should be right there up on the top of the question.
That's a good point.
How do you feel about this? Because if they're adamantly opposed to us, it's a real bad sticking point for us. Because we can talk all we want about what we like. If that board is filled, some towns, they fill up their trust with members who don't want to see any activity. And that's how they kind of get around it. So we certainly wouldn't want to see that here.
I could see creating a appointment question list, and some of them are varying between what appointments you're making, but something to refer to when it's time to make the appointments, and get that spun up for at least June when we do the big appointments, so that we're not left trying to come up with them on the fly. We have something to be referring to. We can do that.
Yeah, just a point of, I think, nuance on what Dorian brought up, which I believe I mentioned in our meeting. You know, it is a delicate thing. I do want to recognize that, you know, I think I mentioned in the meeting, like, I don't necessarily want the select board to take official votes to endorse or not endorse projects, because then we run into the autonomy of the board is being overridden, or the trust is being overridden.
Right.
I guess I would say it's probably an informal discussion that the future board should take, where if you support affordable housing and you support a particular project, you do have an oversized influence with the community. And speaking as a citizen at some of these meetings would, I believe, be beneficial, because, you know, as Bruce said, the people that are against stuff always come out, and there's not a whole lot of people for. But if individual members support a project, I think it would be nice to see you there. If you don't, I don't want to see you there. But
That's fair. Okay. All right. Anything else, Doran?
Yeah, I just want to add to what I heard from Bruce, and correct me if I'm wrong, and just kind of dovetailing off of what Colleen said. So in terms of ZBA too, is there an opportunity for the board to create a policy on ZBA members, or like, is there any way to change the charge to include that you have to be supportive of affordable housing, or is that not our purview?
I think it would be more an emphasis
Okay.
during the appointment discussions, and that would be true for CPC as well.
Yeah.
Really trying to emphasize and tease out what the underlying perspectives are,
Okay.
to make sure that they're in alignment with, you know, supporting affordable housing.
Sure. Okay. And I'm just thinking in terms of, you know, the point made that two members dropping off, you know, like we as a board have a goal of supporting affordable housing right now. Whether or not that's going to be true in 2 years from now, it's hard to say, right? And so what I effectively would like to see done is, you know, if there are ways for us to sort of solidify a roadmap that in the future there's already support from the executive board, where we can do that. I think that would be, you know, it just in order for us to be taking action items, or not starting something and stopping something, or having something, a process be tied up for years. You know, and again, like, certainly because you guys have autonomy, I don't think the board could do that, but does this make sense? I'm just afraid that, I don't want to miss the opportunity if we have a board that's supportive of affordable housing right now, if there are directions that we can take to put policies in place to, you know, help with that down the road, if that's no longer the case.
I will respond to that by saying increasing staffing, right? Making
Yeah.
sure that they have their administrative staff, maybe seeing more staffing in the planning department, and that will outlive whatever this board
Agree.
makeup looks like.
Agree. Okay.
I mean, I guess we're asking this particular body to be the arbiter of, you know, who gets on and who gets off. You guys are elected officials.
Right.
So if the town's will is to not have somebody that's a proponent of affordability, well, then perhaps that's gonna be something that's brought up on the campaign trail anyways. And you'll get voted off and the policy changes and we go back to where we were 10 years ago.
Right.
But for right now, with the initiative that we have and the players that are in now, it makes sense to actually make some of these goals actually executable.
Yep.
The ZBA happens to be an appointed authority, it's not elected.
Okay.
But they have
Got
a
that.
lot of like provincial authority over 40B. Well,
Yeah.
they have all of it. But you know, you don't want to change the terms in which they can operate. It's charter driven. It's, you know,
Sure.
it's dealt with by the state through very good laws.
Yeah. Thanks for that reminder.
yeah, that said, you know, I think that's really all we can ask, is that maybe a policy or whatever that for during the appointing or reappointing process for any boards or committees that interact with affordable housing, asking questions that will give you a sense of whether they actually support it. And I would suggest, bringing up past examples to get their thoughts on things, because everybody can say, I support affordable housing,
Right.
but when the rubber meets the road for a specific project, they do not. So did you support 25 Worcester Street? Did you support Pine? Like all these other projects that actually happen, or give us your thoughts on that. And I think the board will be able to figure out based on the answers, like, hey, am I getting what they think we want to hear, or a real answer?
I think the next slide kind of goes into that too, where we talk about how,
Let me just see if there's anyone else that wants to just ask about anything more on this one here before we move on. I know we've got some people in the audience calling just for a minute. Ray, did you have anything or any input? Brittany or Ed?
No,
I think Dan Kusher has this. Dan, I'm sorry. Thank you. I see your hand now.
Hey.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm liking the ideas I'm hearing, but with the policies, I think the focus should be more on kind of reminding the board of the board's priorities, and not so much about trying to address the potential of a future board that's less supportive, because whatever authority you guys have to create a policy today, they have that same authority to get rid of it. So, if the voters vote for people who are opposed to affordable housing, I hope we would figure that out, on the campaign trail. But yeah, that I think it should be more just to kind of remind what it was that you thought should be done, like asking questions, addressing, the record for people who are up for reappointment, those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. All right, can we go to the next slide? Community Preservation Committee.
so in last week's meeting, again, it was about, we're the appointing authority for a CPC for at least a few of the seats, and then there are committees that have representation on there that we appoint them as well. So making sure that we discuss affordable housing. But that there is other opportunities here about maybe finding a seat for you guys on this committee. I mean, it is a major funding source for you guys. It is how the law is written that there should be an Affordable Housing Trust member on there. The reason there currently isn't one is because the trust didn't exist at the time it was formed here. So there is a housing authority member on there, and I do believe they have quite a few number of members at large that could easily be flipped into an Affordable Housing Trust member if that is something you guys are interested in pursuing. If so, how do you envision that going? Is that something you'd want to see for the spring, or?
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a slam dunk. Most of the other boards that appoint people onto the CPC have some sort of interest in the funding mechanisms with the CPC, with the exception of AHT, which, like you said, was not in existence then. So I think this is a no-brainer.
Okay, so should we work for that for the spring? Is that what you guys would like to see? And if so, do you guys want to propose it and we support it, or do you want us to? How do you want to do that?
Is it a bylaw change?
It is.
It would be a bylaw amending the membership. So what Colleen has suggested is that you would take one of the at-large members and convert them into Affordable Housing Trust shall appoint one of its members to be that representation in that spot.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to get CPC support on this.
Of course.
Love to hear them endorse this. I don't know what they have to say, but I think coming from them, because it's their committee and we can support it, the select board can support it. That's a pretty strong case.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as possible is my thought on it. I don't know what the rest of the trust thinks.
From a logistics standpoint, it'd be easier for you guys to initiate the process.
Okay.
Okay.
So maybe we invite CPC in and have that conversation with them sooner than later, so it's not a repeat of what we saw in the fall.
Or even just reaching out to the chair and letting them have a discussion at their meeting about it. Yeah, but I absolutely agree that they should be involved in the conversation.
They've got a meeting coming up, and I think that's the appropriate step, and then we'll figure out some logistics maybe in late March, if
Yeah.
we can make that work. I think the
We're
timing
gonna
on
be
that
on their
should.
meeting in March too.
I'm sorry?
I had just spoken with Joanne for our update for them, we're gonna be meeting as the trust with the, CPC
Oh,
in
good.
March.
Oh, so that works nicely that you
So
guys
that
can
everything
maybe
kinda,
introduce it and.
I mean, I don't have a problem going to their meeting and proposing it as well. You know, if you guys are gonna be there, it might be easier. I don't know how you all feel, but Matt.
Just maybe between now and then we can just, I don't think this is gonna be a heavy lift, updating that bylaw, so just update it, send it over to them and ask them to discuss it.
Yeah.
We
I
should
agree.
be able to do that before your joint meeting.
Yeah.
And then you can all talk about it together and
certainly put it on our meeting for, March, so we can discuss it formally.
Let me just ask real quick, Ray, Dan, Ed, or Brittany, do you have any comments or questions on that action item?
Oh, I would agree on that. I think a member of Affordable Trust should be on CPC. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I didn't hear the last thing you said though, Bruce. A little muffled.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we are meeting with, we report to the CPC every year. We're meeting with them in March anyways to go over projects and where some spending happened and things of that nature like we typically do. So we're meeting at our regular meeting, the first or second Thursday in March, which should be before that. So if we need to prepare something formal, we can do it in that setting so we can vote on it and take action. Stuff we can't do tonight. So there's plenty of time to
Seems
get
like
this
a
all
ti-
started for spring.
Yeah, love it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's check that one off. It's on the to-do list. Can you flip to the next slide, please? Thank you.
And this was just kind of a catch-all of some of the other things. I'm gonna skip right down to the ARPA one, and what I would like is if you guys know of some possible projects that you might want to see funded with ARPA funds. When the ARPA committee was created, there was a list of like a wish list where people put whatever they wanted on there, and I don't think the trust was given the opportunity to add to that list. So I think I'd want to correct that now, give you an opportunity to jump on that so that the ARPA committee can at least have some of those ideas for consideration.
So,
Oh, you're pointing like something's happening.
oh no, I did reach out to Evan a few months ago. I think there was another conversation because you guys had a meeting where you were proposing to go to a consultant to kind of go through projects and stuff like that. So we're added to that list now, right?
You're certainly able to, yes.
So I guess the only thing from our perspective is what qualifies, what doesn't. I mean, it's not something that we've spent any time on.
We've hired a consultant to help us work us through the particulars of that program. So I'm the select board rep that sits on the ARPA advisory committee. And I had mentioned earlier to Evan, this is something that we want to discuss and talk to our consultants about to see what other projects and other communities are doing, if they can provide some insight and forward to your group for consideration. The caveat with the ARPA funding, I will just warn you, is that unless you've got some shovel-ready project that can be completed and done by 2024, we're up against back on a timeline here on utilizing those funds. So in your considerations, you might want to look at that as your guideline, I guess, depending upon what list of projects that we see other communities are considering using those funds.
Private, public, what's the discretionary
It
pieces?
can kind of be both. And so the ARPA final rule just came out. I want to say probably 3 weeks ago now, maybe longer. But I think there's going to be some different strategies we can discuss at the ARPA meeting that might kind of change the way we look at some of this stuff as far as revenue replacement and things like that, and maybe taking some steps that broaden what you can do with that money. But maybe the best use of our time is we have a meeting this month, and so with the consultant and the group, and talk through some of those questions. If we wanted to use ARPA for one of the reasons we went with the consultant is that they're doing projects in other towns too,
Right.
so they have some guidance for us on, hey, this community's doing this really cool thing or whatever. So I would kind of punt it to that meeting and put that on our agenda to discuss affordable housing options.
So would it behoove us to, in one of our meetings, to discuss what we would perhaps think as potential candidates for what we're trying to do?
Yeah, one thing we will do, Bruce, we'll put together basic guidelines of what affordable housing catchments there are in ARPA, and we can forward that off to you as a primer for your conversation.
Because, you know, one of the things at the top of my head is the trust is, you know, currently trying to figure out a way to kind of offset the fact that we can't do a TIF for the GSX projects on Upton. And it's been kind of a struggle with GSX to find that number that would work. The trust has committed 900,000 now. There is certainly money that's remaining there that we can provide incentive to buy down, you know, 22 units, and still have it be incredibly, you know, successful from a trust perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But
Bruce, can I hop in on this?
yeah, of course.
Sorry, I
Just
don't mean to
finish my
interrupt.
thought.
No, go ahead.
You know, from my perspective, you know, I would want to know a little bit more about the particulars of ARPA and what the limitations are. But it would be short-sighted of the legislation not to consider affordable housing as being one of the primary industries or housing in general being the primary industries that's been affected by COVID. The Telegram just today released information indicating that Grafton was one of the fastest growing housing markets in central Massachusetts. It's been in the top 10. We've seen our housing prices increase by 14.1% just over the past year. Our median price is now $495, up from $434 in 2020. So housing in particular is something that I would think that ARPA would be able to address. Now, the problem that we have is that these opportunities for the Affordable Housing Trust to act swiftly and identify a project are sort of few and far between. The Housing Trust has existed for 15 years before GSX came along. So we can't exactly run out and be like, okay, well, what's the next project that we would be really comfortable throwing our money and our support behind? What I would like to see is let's just fund GSX entirely with ARPA money. Like, there's no reason that $900,000 couldn't come from ARPA to fund GSX. We take the Pulte money and put that back in the bank for the next thing. So the project that we're looking for could potentially already be there. I mean, we don't need to buy down GSX anymore. We could just fund it with ARPA money, I would hope.
That's one of the things that, you know, I was getting to. We have two kind of buckets of money, and each is encumbered to a certain point of how restrictive you can be with what you pay for with that money. If ARPA is something that can just go anywhere, then yeah, that'd be incredibly beneficial for us to offset some of our exposure. Because,
And if that didn't work, we could identify 25 Worcester Street as another one, you know?
sure.
So why don't we get those guidelines out to the trusts and they can evaluate what they can be used for? Seeing if it aligns with some of the goals and objectives and get a consensus from the trust about what it wants to see for a project, and we'll add it to the list. Okay.
Good.
Was there anything else on this slide, Colleen, that you wanted to cover?
Well, it's not just me. It's anybody. If anybody sees it, something they want to talk about, identifying properties as
ahead.
future sites, or
Matt?
Yeah, I mean, so we've seen it happen again with ARPA money where the trust wasn't really considered until now, or until, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, anyways. And so I guess it's just my observation that we haven't had a priority on affordable housing in Grafton for some time. And so as much as the Affordable Housing Trust is learning to, like, what the development process looks like, the town and the select board and the TA's office and planning, and we're all learning now how to support affordable housing. And I think the you know, on the first bullet of discussing the time to reach out to the trust, I think that's these opportunities are very few and far between. So we have to keep it in mind over time, and I think that I'm not sure how we kind of codify that for future boards, but I think we've got to think about, you know, when we have 61A conversions, for example, right? So I know the last one that we had was up on Upton Street. Rob from the Land Trust just jumped on it and said, I have a proposal. The Housing Trust should be in that discussion as well. And maybe
for the wetlands.
Yeah, so that's one circumstance where, and that's the most common one where, and the same thing happened on Pleasant Street where the developer said, I can't develop here, you can have it for conservation. Most developers will do that anyways, when they're done developing the houses that can be developed. But the point is that not every single development is exactly the same. And there may be an opportunity at some point to say, to include an affordable housing component to it. The same thing with if we get lands donated to the town. If the family has a specific goal in mind or not, it might be a good thing to just have a conversation with them to say, hey, an open space need in Grafton is affordable housing. So have you thought about that as a way to honor this land and give it to the town for a really important need? So it's all of those conversations that we need to have the housing trust and affordable housing in mind as we have them. So I think that's something that we need to think about a little bit more, but I would like to put some thought into, because all of these things, they're all the same. It's in the appointments, it's in the discussions about 61A. It's, when we have LIPs, it all potentially touches affordable housing. So they're all opportunities for us potentially to do something.
Is there a way to include it in even just the packet so it triggers us to think about these questions?
Right.
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bruce.
There's no kind of method to the madness. How one comes in, the trust in the past, serving back, 5 or 6 years ago, we would get something that said, hey, could you provide us with a letter? We're going to see if we're going to exercise our right of first refusal. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it's not a project that it's not feasible for us to do. And sometimes it already had some preordained, activity going on to it, which is fine. I guess if we were to start a process where we're kind of building a vehicle, especially now where all this opportunity has presented itself, making sure that as the next opportunity comes in, we're prepared to take advantage of it. Because, what the trust is doing now is, GSX is a great project, but it's the only project we got. So, for us to say, yeah, we're going to spend, $65,000 or $70,000 per unit, to get affordable housing in town, yeah, it's an amazing opportunity. But then when you look at Snow Road, and you're like, okay, there's another 300 units. Well, we should be looking at actually going through our demographic information, which we have prepared in the housing production plan, saying, hey, these are the questions we need to ask them. We need some 3 bedrooms. We need some multifamily. We need these type of resources to keep up with the demand that's in our community. All stuff that we haven't really been doing in the past because there hasn't been anything for us to do. So now that we're here and we're talking about it, setting up those policy things and making sure that there's a free flow of information and making sure it has continuity past, when that staffer leaves or when that person gets off the board. So, you set it up, typically when we see these things, those policies will set in stone for a long, long time. And then it's just a normal working order. And so we'll start to see the projects that come in. And there's still quite a bit of chapter land out there. There's still quite a bit of, developable parcels. And something that, we kind of talked about was land acquisition. So the town is sitting on some pretty impressive parcels. And we certainly like to have some not control, that's a bad word for it, but some input on where these things go. An example of one particular pass we took at a nice parcel was Hudson. And that kind of fell flat at the executive level. So, assessing, property is great, cataloging everything is great. But if you're going to set aside property to develop over the course of 5 to 10 years, it's far more valuable in our portfolio than it is in yours with regards to housing. We just have a lot more discretion over what we can do, and a lot more autonomy on how to get it done. So, but the process by which we take that out, it starts with you and this board. So, if we want to look at some parcels, and say, hey, these are what we want, I guess we can go to town meeting and do what we did with 25 Worcester Street, but it'd be a far better process for us if everybody was inclusive and it came from the top down. And now that dam has been, kind of broke a little bit because we did see, the transfers and the conveyance of town property. So I don't know if anybody has in the trust, this is something we talked about. Anybody else here, want to add to that?
I mean, it's just building the muscle memory to think about affordable housing, and it's no fault of the current board or administration. Like, just whatever hasn't been necessarily a priority in the past, but if you make it one, then I guarantee that there's going to be more opportunities that come up. Especially in the scenario that Matt highlighted, where if a private, individual or trust or whatever can directly donate the land to us, then we don't even have to go through the whole process of town meeting. That speeds up the whole cycle.
Yeah, so the land trust is very aggressive with that, right? And they've been very successful over the past decade in acquiring land that way. And again, I think the trust needs to be in the conversation, or some advocacy needs to be out there so that people become aware that this is a dire need in Grafton, and it's a really worthy thing to donate to think about all of the new families in the community that could be here,
I just wanted to mention, you said something I think is very important, Eric, and that is, creating the muscle memory and keeping affordable housing in the conversation. Because I can say up until probably a year and a half ago, when Grafton conveyed 25 Worcester Street to the Affordable Housing Trust, any or other opportunity that the trust has had in front of it had some sort, the lots were poisoned somehow. And what I mean by that was they were just not viable for affordable housing to really develop into those units for one reason or another. So I would agree with that statement, and that is something that, from a town-owned land perspective, or even looking at future parcels that Matt has alluded to under 621A, that this be part of the top of the conversation and start there. If you find out that that's not a viable area for you, then we just go on to the next process. But I would agree with that. Doreen?
Just a question for any trust member. Has there been any discussion recently about identifying other possible future sites on town-owned property besides 25 Worcester Street that our board should be looking at and supporting? I know Hudson. I know of Hudson, but
Is there anything we can go back and look at Hudson a little deeper?
yeah.
See if there's any trades that can be made, and
Or is that a conversation that you?
It's something that we've certainly talked about. It's something that the housing production plan had identified when we did it last. 25 Worcester Street was a parcel, Hudson was a parcel, in the uplands of the Peralt property. There's a substantial amount of uplands that are back there. I think at that time when we discussed it, the library was going through its build process, and whether it was factual or not, we were told that, while we were in the grant process, you can't talk about any other further development that's going to tie in because it might, impact that process. So we kind of let it go. Just like for the Hudson, we spent a lot of engineering time and dollars, and then we brought it here and we pulled a handwritten warrant article from the 60s saying that it was dedicated for cemetery space. Most people in the cemetery commission didn't even know it was there. So, thinking outside the box and saying, okay, well, preserving land and open space, it's all something that we like. We all live here too. It's something that certainly has its need and things like that, but can we trade one resource for another resource? Can a cemetery go in the uplands behind Peralt? It most certainly can. And you have driveway access now as well. So can we take the restriction off Hudson and then find another place for it? Instead of just saying, no, you can't do this, and then the next day it falls into the abyss and nobody talks about it.
Right.
Until you get a disgruntled person 4 years later coming and bringing it back up with a different board.
Yeah, I would say in general, no is the answer, and it just goes back to the staffing. If we had paid staffing
Sure.
that can work with, planning,
Yeah.
like that can happen. But we're a bunch of volunteers with
course,
lives,
yeah.
and we have institutional knowledge of some parcels, and those ones we go after. But there's, so many that are out there we just haven't analyzed yet.
Some of us need 26 hours out of the day.
Yep.
I get it.
we, to be honest, we don't know what we don't know. I mean,
Right.
this is why,
I think Ed has his hand up.
Yeah. One sec. Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just think that Hudson is actually a really good example of a few different things that we're talking about in here. you know, Hudson came back before the board, I think my first year on the board, and the attitude about it was, we're not looking to support this project, but we're looking for reasons to shoot it down. And, you know, all of a sudden that lot for potential space to house future dead people became much, much more important than housing present live people. And like that's just sort of happened, I think, over the course of the decade or so that I've been doing this, where, yeah, everybody says that they support affordable housing, but when it comes right down to it, the knee-jerk reaction is to figure out a way to defeat a particular project. It's always going to be traffic. It's always going to be a strain on our resources. It's always going to be an open space issue. But there needs to be, I think, the institutional will to be able to understand that, well, housing really affects everybody in ways that people don't really think about all the time. You know, I gave you that statistic a moment ago about the increase in housing prices, which is fantastic for your paper net worth, but it's not going to be really great when the assessor comes back around to determine how much taxes you're going to be paying in the future. And people don't really think about a lot of that. So as far as the support we're looking for, you know, there are concrete, substantive ways that you guys can support us through working with us to get ARPA money and through trying to figure out which town-owned tracts of lands might be appropriate to transfer to us. But there's also like sort of like the leadership aspect of it, where it goes beyond saying, yes, we support this, to taking attitude of like, okay, how can we get this done? And really sort of understanding the key trade-offs when we talk about less density, which preserves a small town feel, and housing prices, which keep people out and make life more difficult to live. So that's the sort of thing, if I could ask anything of you guys, is just to really understand those trade-offs in a way that frankly past boards haven't. You know, the fact that we're having this conversation, I think, is good. I appreciate everybody's comments here tonight and everybody's willingness to keep an open mind about this.
Matt?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the one thing that occurred to me that hasn't really been discussed is we have a funded master plan, and I think we need to make sure that we're prioritizing some discussion and teasing out of land use priorities as we go through that process. And we should really ask the consultants to do a thorough public input process to understand the attitudes about affordable housing in town. That's the thing that will tie it all together and that will help us understand in a more nuanced way some of those trade-offs.
And just so it doesn't go without saying, so a lot of the projects that are currently happening now and the ones that we're envisioning, it'd be fair to say that they don't typically have a detrimental impact on the level of service in the community. Matter of fact, it's quite the opposite from an economic perspective. A lot of the projects, the massive projects you're going to see, are going to be boons to the town as far as revenue is concerned. Apartment buildings are typically a good thing for a community like us who can't really support a commercial base. And even if we had a commercial base, we're still not going to ever be at the point where we're going to have a separate tax rate that we can, leverage some of, the residential burden with, commercial burden. It's just not going to happen. And if it was, it would have happened already. You see the development in other communities around us. Now you're seeing big residential units, which aids us in, an effort to provide affordability in our town. While there are some cosmetic concerns with some of those, developments, they are by and large tax generating machines for the town. And they shouldn't be looked at as a negative impact on services because it just doesn't bear itself out.
Yeah. 150 one-bedroom units at Snow Road is not going to be a net negative.
Yeah, you won't have 3 kids in a family. Yeah.
Well, we even asked to do, when we went through the Prentice Place process, when it was at 50-something units, when in the LIB process, we acted to go back and say, hey, what style of units aren't going to have as much of an impact on services? Because going into that meeting, some of us had looked at the information and the studies that are, peer-reviewed in journal studies, and they, basically said that, by and large, these transient housing where, people come in aren't typically where they're going to raise families. Those are your single-family homes.
Right.
So we looked at the offset of what it was going to cost with what was going to come in with the new assessed value of the property, which was an old abandoned house on 2 acres of land. So the density scared everybody, and that's why it sat for years. But as far as the town was concerned, it might as well be, 3 strip malls, all on 2 acres for what it was going to provide for a return on an investment, so to speak.
Anything else?
And you don't have to look at a strip mall.
I know there was one point we talked about real quick, just getting an update on our status today with affordable housing. Did you want Chris to give some updates to the board at this point?
Oh, well. Ooh, it's 10 minutes to my bedtime. I don't know. I mean, it's getting rough. I've talked for a long time.
You only got yourself to think.
Well, you see,
Yeah, I do.
this at this point, I'm not asking you to, at this point, I'm not asking you to talk anywhere, Bruce. I'm asking Chris to talk.
Perfect.
So, he'll be quick.
Yeah, so
Brittany had something, so just to.
I'm sorry, Brittany, go ahead. I didn't see your hand up. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just listening and observing. I'm pretty new to the local politics and everything, but I do have a big design and background and reframing people's mindset. That's what I do on a daily basis, and I think there's just an overall stigma, not just in Grafton or Massachusetts, but overall nationally against affordable housing. And I think people don't understand that this type of affordable housing that we're trying to push forward is not like Section 8 housing. It's not that type of housing. It's housing for people my age who have student loan debt up the wazoo, are just like can't even afford a house, living with their in-laws, living with their parents, And I think that 10% of 3 bedrooms, 10% of the units being 3 bedrooms is like a kick to the butt for people my age who are trying to family. This is a great place to live, and I want to see more families live here. I think there's a stigma with the aesthetics of the exterior of these places. I think there needs to be a balance of open space and these buildings. If you go to like Somerville, there's a bike path, and all along the bike path is, sprinkled 4-story, 3-story buildings with all these families living there. So I think families do want to live in a transient-oriented place, but there needs to be amenities with that. There needs to be, open spaces sprinkled throughout. I just think that we need to start rethinking about this being a suburban place and more of almost a Worcester area, because it's bleeding in this way. So I'd like to maybe, if it's a way we can rethink the RFP process to add some of that stuff in when we're going out to developers for certain things. But I think overall, and I've talked to Matt about this, is just reframing people's mindset on what affordable housing is, what it can look like. But in 10 years from now, it's not going to look bad. It's going to be upkept. The certain materials are going to be chosen correctly. Because it's just, GC is really cheap out on this stuff, and I think that's what people have seen, but it's starting to change, and I'd like to start changing people's mindsets. Sorry to ramble on, but just been listening and observing, and that's just my expertise, at least.
All right. Thank you, Brittany. All right, Chris?
Yeah, so very briefly with our subsidized housing inventory and our update on that. So I have submitted paperwork to DHCD to request new units for 8 Pine Street, as well as one of the other recent projects. I believe it was Craftsman Village. I'm not going to remember off the top of my head. But certainly the 8 Pine Street would put us over the 10%. It's kind of a 2-step process. So once that is approved and added to the SHI, there's another round of kind of paperwork that goes to DHCD, which is for certification of our housing production plan. That housing production plan, once they go through that process and that gets certified, my understanding is it's backwards effective to the date that it was applied to have the HPP certified. And that's the safe harbor starts at that date from the application, even though DHCD has some time to review. So that's kind of the timing where we are on that. I don't have dates off the top of my head, but I can certainly look into that and try to get a better update and feel of where we are in terms of dates, but I don't have that currently.
Colleen?
So if Eight Pine's gonna get you guys into safe harbor. Is it worth chasing GSX to increase their number to 25 versus settling at the 10 and using the, resources you guys have towards a different project? It's still worth it?
Yep.
Okay.
Pine Street and GSX will put us enough above the 10% required for us to have our, local autonomy, for years.
Okay.
Because you got to match current growth rates, you got to match need, but just, that's only one part of it. The other part is, actually what Brittany had alluded to is, tailoring these developments to, to allow people like her to come into the community, which is, probably the bigger and the more ideological impact we can have as a trust.
Dan?
So two things. I think GSX or Pine Street alone would not put us over 10%, right? Pine Street plus Upton, the 1727 Upton Street. If we do that, that would put us over 10%, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's probably correct. I forget there's a subdivision that has been completed, a 40B subdivision. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head which one it was.
Okay.
Because there's a couple that were that we've been cleaning up and adding those to the SHI piece by piece. So we've been chipping away at it, and I just don't remember which one it specifically is pending right now.
I thought the number was 471 was 10% of our what we needed. SHI anyways. But either way, GSX and the other projects that are there, because you only have to make a measured improvement to be in safe harbor. So you don't have to have the whole 10%.
Okay. Is that where I'm missing?
Sorry, yeah. So that
Okay.
I and thank you for that clarification. I did say the 10%, but that looking back at the housing production plan, so the essentially 36 units per year, you can get 1 year of safe harbor. Or if it's double that, you get 2 years. So we'll have the 2 year safe harbor for these projects, and then certainly, with Upton Street coming online, we'll likely be able to kind of push that along until we go over the 10%.
Dan, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. So one other thing about 1727 Upton Street, with 8 Pine Street, it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And if there weren't the train station right next to it, it wouldn't really be a great place to be doing something like this. It would be a popular place because a lot of people, they don't want affordable housing in their backyard. Well, 8 Pine Street's nobody's backyard. But there's a lot of value to having something in an area that already has housing and already has commercial stuff around it, like the 1727 Upton Street, which is right by the Common. So I think supporting stuff like that, 25 Worcester Street, 1727 Upton Street, where it's in a location where there's already a neighborhood, that's also a really valuable thing that the select board can support. And a reason why we would still want to do this, even if 8 Pine Street were to get us all the way there.
Eric, yeah.
Yeah, and just a quick point, I think we touched on this very briefly in our last meeting, but we asked the question, like, what is the driver post 10%? And I think it just becomes a moral one of providing affordable housing in the town. We don't have to worry about the autonomy anymore, and then it's just putting dollars to get max ROI on making housing more affordable in Grafton.
Personally, I would like to see policies go, above the 10% minimum of what 40B allows these developers to do. I'd like to see 50% in some situations. And do you guys believe that reaching this type of safe harbor, that is like an obtainable objective that the town should be seeking?
Well, certainly. Yeah. You're looking at 1,000 units that are, Snow Road. There's 2 other ones that are fairly significant developments as well. Plus you have, Matt had referenced it before, the commuter rail, so that law that has to be kind of deployed in town as well. So there's a lot there's a lot there. And then, like you just said, going to 50% affordable or things like that. Maybe that gets tuned into, hey, we want to see, 30% of your apartment complex be 3-bedroom, more conducive to families, or we want you to tailor it in this perspective. There's also affordability and stuff that we can be doing that's not just strictly housing that we can do with town property. There is a massive need out there for housing for people who require assistance. The town has a fair amount of group homes which are at capacity. These are things that we should be exploring that we need to make sure we're privy of after we get past that 10%. Because my fear would be once you get to that 10%, nobody's going to care anymore. Which happens, and that's fine, but, and that's why we're kind of here now is to, set up this vehicle to keep it moving forward. But we should be thinking about, stuff beyond what we are talking about now, which is there's 300 there, there's 200 here, there's an assortment of bedrooms. There's stuff we should be doing that's going to make the Commonwealth and the country a better place, and it starts here at the local level.
Ed, and then Dorian.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that, I love everybody's enthusiasm. There are just some realities here. When you start talking about 50% affordable in a development, you're talking about making it a little bit more difficult for developers to come in and develop to begin with, because they're not volunteers doing it for free. They're doing it to make a living. And that it comes back to money. At the end of the day, this is all about the money. So that's why, things like funding for affordable housing are so important. Things like advocacy and putting the right people on boards like CPC is so important, because at the end of the day, the Affordable Housing Trust needs money. And once we get past 25 Worcester Street and GSX, the Pulte money's gone. The savings that the trust has built up over 15 years is gone. And we're right back to that, $40,000 increment funding from CPC. So while anything is possible, and it's, again, the board's attitude is fantastic. I was on a board where I was told by a chair that we're never going to get to out from under 40B, and we shouldn't even try. Now it looks like the safe harbor is easily, nothing's easy, but easily achievable, relatively speaking. And getting out from under 40B is definitely doable with what we've got on the table. So, but it's all about the cash. And I just want everybody to remember that at the end of the day.
Doreen?
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Peter. I just wanted to loop back to acknowledge what Dan said, and then what Brittany commented on earlier. First, Dan, in terms of his comment about Pine Street, and then looking at more high density areas in town like Worcester Street and Upton Street, and I really I just want to acknowledge that I agree. I think that's a great idea, and we should not be looking at affordable housing units as places to put on the outskirts of town, but housing that we want to integrate into the community that already exists, particularly dense areas like maybe North Grafton or certainly the center of town. And then Brittany, I just wanted to thank you for your comment. I think that reframing people's minds is really the crux of the issue here, and the conversation that I needed to have today. And as we sort of look at building out a master plan, that really what we're doing is we're also reframing Grafton, right? And not thinking about it as maybe the suburb it is now, but what we're looking at in the future. And again, integrating affordable housing into that. And not to get too personal, but, I have a daughter who's in her 20s and an adult, and I know, her and her friends, and I see this generation coming up, and there's, even with, college degrees and good jobs, I don't know how people afford housing. And she lives in San Francisco right now, so I walked around a city with thousands of people living in tents, and come back here to our town. And, I take this issue seriously, and I think that, I just want to thank you all for your time and efforts and helping us to understand tonight, like what we can do to just start driving this conversation in a positive direction for our community, because it's a a very important one.
Thanks, Doreen. Anything else from anybody? Well, thank you very much for coming
If
out.
we do,
I'm sorry, Brittany, did you have
oh,
something?
sorry. I have one more thing, just a question. If we do start to build more in these areas that are dense, for instance, on Worcester Street, if you're trying to get to the Stop and Shop, there's not really a way to walk there. Can we work into the RFP some way to upgrade the infrastructure or the sidewalks so that people can actually start to have a walkable amenities nearby, things like that? Is that something that's in place already, or can we help get that in place?
Yeah. Sidewalks are another goal of the board.
Less than quarter mile completion of sidewalk on Worcester Street, from I believe the diesel delay post all the way down to the intersection.
You're talking about complete streets and.
Well, so certainly complete streets is one of the ways that the municipality can support that infrastructure upgrade. But also if it goes through the 40B process of, for these private projects, some of those infrastructure upgrades are things, offsite improvements that the ZBA can push developers to include in their projects. The caveat being that it does bring into that there has to be peer review of the pro forma and the financing of the project. You can't require infrastructure upgrades that'll make the project financially unfeasible. But in those cases where they're reviewing those applications, there may be opportunities for that kind of development or a portion of proceeds to go to, and then the municipality, funding the difference in those projects. So,
gotcha.
Yeah, good.
So Chris, I know we've got a pretty good project on Main Street, and I know the planning board many years ago were looking at approaching the state with a STIP type program on 122. Is there anything active going on with that? I mean.
Yeah, so there hasn't been updates that I have right now for that tip. It's still on the books, but.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much for all coming in tonight. Brittany, Ed, Dan, Eric, Bruce, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Yep. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You all right there?
He's laughing at Dan.
Oh.
Got a nice
Yeah.
picture.
Dan has a nice picture up.
Okay, next up here on our agenda, we have capital stabilization policy. So we're bringing this back from a previous meeting to evaluate and take action on this tonight.
Last week,
If
right?
the
You guys
board-
amended this, right?
Made some changes.
I saw it, yeah.
Any questions on those changes? All right, hearing none, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to approve the capital and road stabilization procedure as presented.
Second.
I have a motion made at second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio?
DeFazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead eye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. All right, moving up, we don't have any resignations tonight, but we have two town administrator appointments tonight. We have, there's a slight typo misplacement here, Recreation Commission for Michael Bruni. Do we have any questions or comments on that? If not, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board vote to affirm the town administrator's appointment of Michael Bruni to the Recreation Commission for a term to expire on June 30, 2023.
Second.
Motion made a second. Any discussion on the motion? This will be roll call. All those in favor? Mr.
DeFazio,
Fazio?
aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead eye.
Mr. Often?
Often aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Next up, we have an affirmation appointment for full-time custodian. Any questions? If not, I can entertain a motion.
Let's see, I don't have my motion with me.
Right here.
Do you
Just
remember his name?
vote to affirm.
I vote to affirm George Rollinson to the position of full-time custodian. Is Is there an effective date?
Effective date, February 21st.
Effective date 2021, sorry, February 21, 2022.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead eye.
Mr. Opton?
Optin, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, I.
Carlson, aye. Clear motion carried. Thank you. Alright, so next up on here, just new business, we put on here for budget and capital discussion. They can be taken in any particular order, but I just wanted to, thank Evan, for, good budget presentation last week, using the new, ClearGov as the engine for showing the numbers. I have to say it was very easy to follow. And personally, I'll speak for myself, I loved it. I love, and I like see where it's gonna go, and I think the public is gonna be really grateful for that, but, anyone else have any other, particular components on the budget that they would like to bring up, or any questions from last week's presentation?
I really like ClearGov too. I really like generating reports and having them email it to you. I just think it's so fun.
I can't stop playing with it.
I know.
Great.
I will say that we met with CIPC last week.
Yep.
And made a couple of tweaks to the capital budget as I had originally presented it, but CIPC voted to support that version of the capital plan, so that is now what's in the budget book and
Great.
available to the public, and what will go forward to town meeting. So
Great.
it's good to be done and have
what's-
that buttoned up, ready to go.
What's that number? 1.5?
It's 1.549, I think.
Yeah.
1.509750.
There you go.
Thank you.
If you want to be precise.
It's like I was there.
Alright. Any other questions or comments? Does anyone want to see this on a future agenda as the budget season progresses?
Well, I mean, is it possible that you're going to see changes as you flesh this out anymore? So will you just update
Honestly,
us?
it's already changed since.
Well, what are some of the changes?
They're all revenue side, and that's gonna be the major stuff you're gonna change. So like literally every day, the projected surplus number changes. Up or down, not crazy numbers, but as things get tweaked and rolled in, and we get other revenue numbers in, we move stuff around. I can leave this on. We can put this as a regular TA update.
I would.
And I can talk about any changes that come up. FinCom, I actually meet with my FinCom guests tomorrow, and I think as they do their initial pass and we start meeting in March, might get into that negotiation part, I guess, for lack of a better term, where we might move some numbers around or change some things based on FinCom's feelings or recommendations as we go. So I can just put that on and we can discuss it at each juncture.
Sounds great. Okay.
Does that work
Plan.
for everybody?
Yep.
If, of course, anyone has any more questions, but if anyone has any future questions or wants to bring something up, just reach out to me and we'll put it on. But go ahead, Colin.
Did BVT firm up at all yet, or?
They don't even have their meeting till March 10th.
Okay.
So the number I got was just preliminary courtesy from Dr. Fitzpatrick, and really he emphasized that school committee has not voted on this, but I know you need something to stick, a starting point. So that's where we're at.
Okay.
So after March 10th, I'll have that firmed up.
Awesome.
Good.
Okay. All right.
We'll ask you March 11th.
All right, then moving on. If there's no further questions for budget or capital, does anyone have any select board member reports?
Evan just covered mine. We met with Evan at
Sorry.
CIPC.
CIPC. Okay. Matt?
Thanks, Pete. So I was made aware over the weekend of some personal commentary that was made on a Facebook group about one of our elected officials and their families. And I just wanted to make a quick statement about that.
Sure.
So I'm not going to dignify the commentary by repeating it or going into any detail. But I did want to say something. This commentary, as it always does, went right back to that elected official's attention. This wasn't somebody being critical of a policy. It wasn't somebody criticizing a position or something that was said in a meeting. It was something completely different. So everybody on this board has suffered criticism of their positions. That's 100% legitimate. We all expect it, and it's actually part of a healthy, functioning government. But that's not what I'm talking about. So this commentary that I'm talking about was just mean. It was really hurtful, and it was a personal attack. And then to make it worse, it was affirmed by other people in the group. This is completely unacceptable. And I would just ask that residents think about how hurtful that type of commentary is and how it discourages the very public service that we need to maintain a healthy community. Everybody loves to talk about our great community. The foundation of our community really is about shared respect amongst our residents. So I would ask that if you see that type of commentary or hear it, don't just sit by and let it happen. Call it out and do what you can do to stop it. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Any other select board member reports?
No, I just really appreciate Matt bringing that up because it was upsetting, and it's certainly not the first time, and probably won't be the last time, but it is something to call out, like you said.
Again, criticize me for my policies, for my
Okay.
discussion in meetings, for my positions all day long. Don't make it personal. Don't bring my family into it. And don't do that for your other elected officials because it just discourages participation and people volunteering.
Yep.
We can't have that.
I agree. Any other select board member reports? Matt, I just wanted to say thank you for reading that statement. That too has been on my mind for several days. I too was made aware of it over the weekend. And to the affected parties, I'm sorry that happened to you. And I'm sorry that happened to you and your family. I know all of us have been criticized or ridiculed at some point online, and it's never fun. But to see it go to a level beyond the policies, the decisions that we make as the governing board, which is effectively we're volunteering here on behalf of the town, it does become discouraging. And inappropriate. So I do hope that the people who were impacted by this, find some solace in moving forward and continue volunteering in our community in the capacity that they serve, and that other people will just respect that and just disagree solely on the policies moving forward, like you stated. Thank you. All right, town administrator reports.
Yeah, I just have two things. I think Will's gonna share a couple of slides here. Before I get moving, Chris, I don't think you have to stay. Oh, you have
Oh,
to stay.
no.
You go to the first slide. All right, so the first thing on my update is the Vadar accounting software. So we're in full swing on our switchover. So Mary has been meeting with department heads for about a week and a half straight, and identifying changes that need to be made to the chart of accounts. And for those who don't know, the chart of accounts is really the backbone of every financial transaction that happens in Grafton. I mean, it really is crucial to have that right. So we're using, best accounting practices to structure that account, but we're also getting feedback from every department head on things that they may have seen over the years, changes they want to make, consolidations, all of those things to build a better chart. You can see in the current chart of accounts just historical drift and changes that have come by different financial teams wanting different or implementing different practices. And so we're going straight to a best practice model that should just be adhered to forever. It's really, we're using what Massachusetts deems as the best case. As a result of this process and changeover, we are going to be delaying motor vehicle excise tax bills going out by roughly 30 days. So they're going to be mailed out on the 13th and they're due on the 18th. So same 30-day window, just pushed out basically 1 month instead of issuing them in February. And that's just an issue with the timing of the two softwares we're currently running in conjunction being able to do what we need it to do. So we are going to be, from here on out, really closer to the beginning of March, we're going to be running two software systems and inputting into two software systems. at the same time. So it is going to be quite a burden for some of the folks, especially the collector's office. But the way that it works is we basically pick the 22nd of February as a freezing date. And then from there on, everything gets balanced against each other. And then that date through June 30th, we're in both systems. And then both systems have to agree June 30th. And then July 1, we're totally cut over to the new system. So it's quite an undertaking. Finance folks are really taking the brunt of that, but they're doing a great job. And I think it's going to be very beneficial once we get to that end product. And I think people will see that in their daily work. So we're pretty excited about that. Any questions on Vadar?
Do you plan to do a press release about the excise tax or anything like that so people
Yep.
are good?
Yep, that we just got that date from the software engineer folks today, so
Okay.
that'll be going out tomorrow.
Great.
I think most people would be okay waiting an extra.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to speak for everybody.
Exactly. And then I did have a brief update from Chief Canoyer at the Grafton Fire Department. And these are kind of the three high-level things that they're working on currently. They have a whole host of software that the fire department uses called Fire Programs. That's what it's called. And we've pretty much been underutilizing it. And so the chief, along with deputy and all the command staff, they've been working very hard to get us using those actual modules for proper use. And so their goal, and it looks like they'll hit this, is that all reports from every run will be entered electronic only by March 1st. So no matter what station you go back to, you have a computer there. That's where the report gets keyed in, goes into the collective fire program software, and that's it. Now we have constant run data all the time.
Fantastic.
Right now, they've instituted paper and electronic only because it's kind of a training process, and some people have better proficiency with computers than others. So just as they do that, they've kind of got a redundant system working. They've been working on their standard operating procedures. So there's a group. I can't remember if Paul said there was 5 or 6. But they went out to 5 communities, got all of their SOPs and SOGs, and they're working to create a new standard operating procedure manual and update what they do have already.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so they're making really good progress on that. And they think they're going to have something on that in March as well. And then training, they've been working to develop a program based upon the academy coursework. So there's 2 people spearheading that. He said they're mostly focusing on indoor training now, stuff with, their breathing apparatus and other things, just because it's darn cold outside and nobody wants to go stand around in that. But they do have a training program that they're instituting that will carry them through spring and into the hiring of the next chief. So that was just 3 of the larger things they're working on. It was quite a long conversation. They're doing a lot of good work, but I just wanted to pass that along to the board that they're making excellent progress and working really hard. So really nice to see.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
No, just a comment. Thanks for that update, and please let Paul know. Job well done, and I'm just really grateful for the entire Grafton Fire Department for stepping up during this transitional time. And really going beyond, because instead of just looking at status quo and just keeping our head above water while we hire our next fire chief. They're taking on all these extra responsibilities, and it's much appreciated.
Yeah, it really is. Thank you. I'll let him know.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
I'll also tell him that the 3 rest of you didn't say
Yeah,
anything.
I wanted to say
me.
ditto, but I was
No,
like,
just me. Just
Just Doreen.
Just Doreen
Yeah.
said that.
Now I have to say something. The progress that has been made in all aspects of the Grafton Fire Department in the last 6 weeks has been absolutely amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And the leadership is just, it's really just, I can't stop saying amazing. What they've done in 6 weeks is amazing. it's great.
Yeah.
And they should be very proud.
Absolutely.
And also, if they can just add to their list to do, like Santa Claus in July, I
There
wouldn't
you
be
go.
opposed to it.
Okay.
They do the Easter Bunny, so
All
get
right.
excited about
Yeah,
that.
that's true.
I hear that might be amazing.
It's amazing. Amazing. Go right by my house. You can come over. It's awesome.
Well, thank you, Evan, for that. That's,
Yeah.
appreciate that. They were, I've been quiet all night, and I couldn't think of anything else to say, so that's why I said that. But I think
One
and
amazing.
I have this habit of repeating myself, so I keep saying amazing. I'm gonna call you tomorrow morning and say it again.
I would not doubt that, Ray.
All right. Thank you for that update. All right. Next up, do we have any correspondence the board wants to review in the packet?
I just want to mention one thing. There is an older piece of correspondence in the packet. It was mixed in with the folder of other correspondence and just didn't get scanned for that meeting. And so we have found that and put it in just to make sure that it's recorded in the record.
That was Tim Rodriguez'
Yep.
letter. Okay, thank you. All right. No questions? All right, moving on. Contract award for Federico Company LLC. Give us some background on this?
Sure. I think Will will give us the background on it.
Yeah, so this contract award is for a recreation project at two sites around town, 245 Upton Street and 115 Ferry Street. So at both of them, they're replacing the rolling doors and the counters at the snack shacks, and at 115 Ferry Street, they're also doing ADA accessibility work for the dugouts and the bathrooms. This was a rebid. We put the project out to bid in the fall of last year. Didn't get anybody, so Jen, myself, and Neil Dixon worked to sort of redo it a little bit. We put it back out to bid and finally got somebody, which is truly amazing. And the contract is now before you.
All right, any questions on the contract for recreation?
It was amazing.
Colleen just took your thunder
Okay,
there,
okay,
Brian.
that's enough.
All right, any discussion? If not, I can entertain a motion.
I move the board awards the contract to Federico Company LLC for accessibility renovations and appurtenant work in an amount not to exceed $53,820 and to authorize the chair to sign.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those may roll call, please. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead eye.
Mr. Upton?
Upton, aye.
Ms. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, aye. Clear, motion carried. Okay, well, that kind of sums up the rest of our meeting. We don't have any meeting minutes tonight to go over. Yes?
Can I speak to that though? I do think people are looking for them, and we just are falling behind because we don't have staff. So I just wanted to throw that out there why it's behind right now.
All right. We'll get working on that.
Mhm.
Yep. All right. Anything else? No reason to go into executive session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those may roll call, please, to adjourn. Mr. Fazio?
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Mead?
Mead eye.
Mr. Upton?
Upton, aye.
Mr. Roy?
Roy, aye.
Carlson, aye. Clear, motion carried. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much for attending. Cheers.
Night.